The year was 1859, and in a cramped wooden house in Cleveland, Ohio, a 16-year-old boy sat hunched over a worn leather notebook by the flickering light of a single candle. His name was John Davison Rockefeller, and with meticulous precision, he recorded every single penny that passed through his hands. 3 cents for an apple, 5 cents for shoe polish, 2 cents saved from his meager allowance. The boy's eyes burned with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the darkness of poverty that surrounded him, as if he could already see the empire he would one day build rising from the ashes of his humble beginnings. This was not just any ordinary teenager keeping track of pocket money. This was the birth of a legend, the first stirrings of what would become the most systematic and methodical approach to wealth accumulation the world had ever witnessed. In that dimly lit room, surrounded by the scent of his mother's home-cooked beans and the sound of his father's irregular footsteps on the creaking floorboards, young Rockefeller was unknowingly applying principles that would later be decoded and immortalized by another giant of success literature, Napoleon Hill. Hill, the master decoder of wealth creation, would spend 25 years of his life interviewing over 500 of America's most successful individuals, distilling their secrets into the timeless masterpiece, Think and Grow Rich. But perhaps no single life story embodied Hill's principles more perfectly than that of John D. Rockefeller, the man who would transform from a penny-counting clerk into the richest human being in modern history, controlling nearly 2% of America's entire economy at the peak of his power. What you are about to discover is not merely a historical account, but a blueprint for transformation, the secret fusion of Hill's revolutionary principles with Rockefeller's relentless execution that created a fortune so vast it defied comprehension. Stay until the end, because you are going to discover the secret principles that transformed Rockefeller into the richest man in history, and how you too can apply them in your life today. Subscribe now and activate the bell so you don't miss any of these revelations that could change your financial destiny forever. The fire of burning desire, the obsession that ignited an empire. In the depths of Napoleon Hill's research, he discovered that every great fortune began with what he called a burning desire, not a mere wish or hope, but an all-consuming obsession that transforms the very fabric of one's existence. For young John D. Rockefeller, this burning desire was forged in the crucible of childhood poverty and uncertainty, crystallizing into an unshakable determination that would drive him to extraordinary heights. The seeds of this obsession were planted during those formative years when Rockefeller watched his mother, Eliza, stretch every dollar to feed their family while his father, William, disappeared for months at a time on mysterious business ventures. The boy who meticulously recorded every penny in his notebook wasn't simply being frugal. He was developing an almost mystical relationship with money, understanding its power to provide security, stability, and ultimately, freedom from the crushing anxiety of financial uncertainty. Hill wrote that burning desire must be specific, definite, and backed by a burning intensity that refuses to accept defeat. Rockefeller's desire was crystal clear from his teenage years. He would become wealthy beyond measure, not for the sake of luxury or ostentation, but to ensure that neither he nor his family would ever again experience the gnawing fear of poverty. This wasn't a casual goal scribbled in a diary. It was a sacred covenant he made with himself, reinforced every single day through his obsessive attention to financial detail. When Rockefeller landed his first job as a bookkeeper at Hewitt & Tuttle, earning 50 cents a day, he didn't see it as merely employment. He saw it as his university of wealth creation. Every transaction he recorded, every balance sheet he reconciled, every negotiation he witnessed became a building block in his comprehensive understanding of how money flowed through the arteries of commerce. His colleagues might have seen a quiet, methodical young man going about his duties, but what they couldn't perceive was the inferno of ambition burning behind those calm, calculating eyes. Hill emphasized that burning desire must be accompanied by complete faith in one's ability to achieve the goal, and Rockefeller possessed this faith in abundance. Even as a teenager earning minimal wages, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who knew his current circumstances were merely temporary. He studied successful businessmen with the intensity of a scientist examining specimens under a microscope, absorbing their methods, their speech patterns, their decision-making processes, building within himself the foundation of the oil empire that would soon emerge. The true test of burning desire, according to Hill, comes not in moments of comfort, but in times of adversity. When the economic panic of 1857 struck Cleveland like a financial tsunami, wiping out businesses and leaving thousands unemployed, most people retreated into survival mode. But Rockefeller saw opportunity gleaming like gold amid the wreckage. While others worried about keeping their jobs, he began planning how to start his own business, recognizing that economic chaos creates the perfect conditions for those bold enough to act decisively. This burning desire wasn't contained within the walls of ambition. It radiated outward, influencing every aspect of Rockefeller's existence. He didn't drink alcohol because it might cloud his judgment. He avoided frivolous expenditures because every dollar saved was a dollar that could be invested in his future empire. He cultivated relationships not for social pleasure, but for strategic advantage, understanding that wealth creation is rarely a solitary endeavor. Faith and vision, the unshakable belief in destined greatness. Napoleon Hill identified faith as the foundation upon which all great achievements are built, not religious faith alone, but the profound, unquestioning belief in one's ability to transform dreams into reality. For John D. Rockefeller, this faith manifested as an almost supernatural confidence in his destined greatness, a vision so clear and compelling that it seemed to bend reality itself to conform to his will. From his earliest days in business, Rockefeller possessed what Hill called auto-suggestion, the ability to program his subconscious mind with absolute certainty of success. When he established his first business partnership with Maurice Clark in 1859, investing his life savings of $800, he didn't approach it as a hopeful venture, but as the inevitable first chapter of a predetermined destiny. His faith wasn't blind optimism, it was a calculated confidence based on his systematic preparation and unwavering commitment to excellence. This faith revealed itself most powerfully in Rockefeller's approach to the emerging oil industry. When petroleum was first discovered in Pennsylvania in 1859, most people saw it as a curiosity, a temporary phenomenon that might provide modest returns for a few lucky speculators. But Rockefeller's vision penetrated deeper than surface appearances. He saw oil not as a passing trend, but as the lifeblood of America's industrial future, the essential fuel that would power locomotives, light homes, and drive the machinery of progress. Hill wrote extensively about the power of visualization, and Rockefeller was a master practitioner of this principle decades before Hill codified it. In quiet moments, often late at night in his modest Cleveland home, Rockefeller would close his eyes and envision vast networks of refineries, pipelines snaking across continents, and oil flowing like rivers of gold into his carefully orchestrated empire. These weren't daydreams, they were detailed blueprints burned into his consciousness with such intensity that they became more real than his current circumstances. The depth of Rockefeller's faith became evident when he made the decision to focus exclusively on oil refining rather than drilling. While thousands of fortune seekers rushed to Pennsylvania to dig wells and strike oil, Rockefeller recognized that the real wealth lay not in finding oil, but in controlling its refinement and distribution. This counterintuitive insight required tremendous faith, as it meant ignoring the obvious path that everyone else was taking and betting his entire future on a vision that existed primarily in his imagination. When Rockefeller borrowed money to expand his refinery operations, he didn't approach lenders as a supplicant, hoping for charity. He presented himself as the inevitable future titan of the oil industry, speaking with such conviction and detailed knowledge that bankers found themselves swept up in his vision. His faith was so complete and compelling that it infected others, creating a magnetic field that attracted the capital, talent, and opportunities necessary to transform his vision into reality. Hill taught that faith must be reinforced through repetition and emotional intensity, and Rockefeller intuitively understood this principle. He surrounded himself with visual reminders of his goals, keeping detailed charts and projections that mapped out his empire's expansion. He spoke about his plans with such certainty that his employees began to see themselves not as workers in a small Cleveland refinery, but as soldiers in an army destined to conquer the oil industry. Perhaps the most remarkable demonstration of Rockefeller's faith came during the economic depression of 1873, when panic gripped the nation and businesses collapsed like dominoes. While competitors retreated and consolidated, Rockefeller saw the crisis as divine providence, an opportunity to acquire struggling refineries at a fraction of their true value. His faith never wavered because he understood that temporary setbacks were merely testing grounds for those destined for greatness. Organized planning, the architecture of the Standard Oil Empire. Napoleon Hill proclaimed that all achievement begins with organized planning, the systematic translation of desire and faith into concrete action. For John D. Rockefeller, this principle became the cornerstone of what would become the most methodically constructed business empire in American history. His approach to planning wasn't merely thorough, it was almost mathematical in its precision, combining visionary scope with microscopic attention to detail. The genesis of Standard Oil in 1870 wasn't a spontaneous business decision, but the culmination of over a decade of meticulous planning and preparation. Rockefeller had spent years studying every aspect of the oil industry, from the geology of petroleum deposits to the economics of transportation, from the chemistry of refining to the psychology of consumer demand. When he finally moved to consolidate the industry, he wasn't gambling. He was executing a master plan that had been refined and perfected through countless iterations. Hill emphasized that organized planning requires what he called a mastermind group, a coalition of individuals whose combined knowledge and effort can achieve what no single person could accomplish alone. Rockefeller understood this principle instinctively, surrounding himself with some of the most brilliant minds in American business. His partnership with Henry Flagler brought financial acumen and strategic thinking, while his alliance with Samuel Andrews provided technical expertise in refining operations. Each member of his inner circle was chosen not for friendship or personal loyalty, but for their ability to contribute specific skills essential to the empire's growth. The architectural blueprint of Standard Oil revealed Rockefeller's genius for organized planning on multiple levels simultaneously. While his competitors focused on single aspects of the oil business, drilling, refining, or distribution, Rockefeller envisioned and systematically constructed a vertically integrated monopoly that would control every stage of oil production from wellhead to consumer. This wasn't accidental or opportunistic. It was the methodical execution of a comprehensive plan that anticipated and addressed every possible challenge. Rockefeller's planning extended far beyond business operations into the realm of competitive strategy. He didn't simply want to succeed in the oil industry, he wanted to control it so completely that competition became impossible. His famous railroad rebate schemes weren't desperate attempts to cut costs, but carefully orchestrated elements of a larger plan to create insurmountable barriers to entry for potential competitors. By securing secret agreements with railroad companies that gave Standard Oil preferential shipping rates, he created a competitive advantage that made it virtually impossible for rivals to survive. The systematic nature of Rockefeller's planning became evident in his approach to acquisitions. Rather than randomly purchasing struggling companies, he developed detailed criteria for evaluating potential targets, considering factors such as refinery capacity, geographical location, management quality, and strategic value within his overall empire. Each acquisition was like placing a precisely cut piece in an enormous jigsaw puzzle, contributing to a predetermined pattern that would eventually cover the entire oil industry landscape. Hill taught that organized planning must be flexible enough to adapt to changing circumstances, while maintaining focus on ultimate objectives. Rockefeller demonstrated this principle during the Great Railroad Strike of 1877, when transportation disruptions threatened to paralyze his operations. Instead of panicking or waiting for the crisis to pass, he immediately activated contingency plans that had been prepared years in advance, utilizing alternative transportation methods and temporary storage facilities to maintain operations while competitors ground to a halt. The documentation systems that Rockefeller implemented at Standard Oil revealed his understanding that organized planning requires comprehensive information management. Every transaction was recorded in multiple ledgers. Every employee's performance was monitored and evaluated. Every competitor's activities were tracked and analyzed. This wasn't merely bookkeeping. It was the creation of an intelligence network that provided the real-time information necessary for strategic decision-making in a rapidly evolving industry. The mastermind principle, building an invincible alliance of strategic minds. Napoleon Hill identified the mastermind principle as perhaps the most crucial element in achieving extraordinary success. The coordination of knowledge and effort between two or more people working in harmony toward a definite purpose. For John D. Rockefeller, this principle became the secret weapon that transformed a small Cleveland refinery into the most powerful corporation on Earth, demonstrating how the right combination of minds could generate power far beyond the sum of their individual capabilities. The foundation of Rockefeller's Mastermind Alliance was laid in 1870 when he formed the Standard Oil Company with his most trusted associates. This wasn't simply a business partnership, but a carefully orchestrated union of complementary talents and personalities. Henry Flagler brought aristocratic connections and financial sophistication. Samuel Andrews contributed technical expertise and operational knowledge, while Rockefeller himself provided strategic vision and relentless execution. Together, they created a collective intelligence that could analyze problems from multiple perspectives and develop solutions that none of them could have conceived independently. Hill wrote that the Mastermind Alliance generates what he called psychic power, a heightened form of creative intelligence that emerges when harmonious minds focus on common objectives. The Standard Oil boardroom became a laboratory for this phenomenon, where heated discussions and respectful disagreements forged decisions of extraordinary clarity and effectiveness. Rockefeller encouraged dissent and debate within his inner circle, understanding that the collision of different viewpoints often sparked insights that transformed challenges into opportunities. The genius of Rockefeller's mastermind approach extended beyond his immediate partners to encompass a vast network of allies throughout American business and politics. He cultivated relationships with railroad executives, government officials, banking magnates, and industrial leaders, creating a web of mutual interests that provided Standard Oil with advantages unavailable to competitors. These relationships weren't based on friendship or social connection, but on carefully calculated exchanges of value that benefited all parties while advancing Rockefeller's ultimate objectives. One of the most powerful demonstrations of the mastermind principle in action occurred during Standard Oil's expansion into international markets. Rather than attempting to understand foreign business cultures and regulatory environments on his own, Rockefeller systematically recruited local partners in each target market who possessed intimate knowledge of their respective territories. In Russia, he allied with the Rothschilds. In the Dutch East Indies, he partnered with Royal Dutch Shell, in each case combining Standard Oil's operational expertise with local partners' market knowledge to create formidable competitive advantages. The internal structure of Standard Oil itself reflected Rockefeller's sophisticated understanding of the mastermind principle. Instead of centralized autocracy, he created what modern business theorists would recognize as a matrix organization, where specialized departments collaborated across functional boundaries to optimize overall performance. The transportation department worked closely with refining operations to minimize costs, while the marketing division coordinated with production planning to ensure supply met demand. This integrated approach required constant communication and coordination, transforming the entire organization into a massive mastermind alliance. Rockefeller's ability to maintain harmony within his mastermind group, despite the enormous pressures and high stakes involved, demonstrated his intuitive understanding of human psychology. He treated his key associates as true partners rather than subordinates, sharing both profits and decision-making authority in ways that kept everyone aligned with common objectives. When disagreements arose, he facilitated resolution through patient discussion and compromise rather than dictatorial decree, understanding that forced compliance would undermine the voluntary cooperation essential to mastermind success. The ultimate test of any mastermind alliance comes during moments of crisis, and Rockefeller's group proved their mettle during the antitrust investigations and legal challenges that threatened Standard Oil's existence. Rather than fragmenting under pressure, the mastermind alliance strengthened its bonds, with each member contributing specialized expertise to navigate the complex legal and political challenges. Lawyers, public relations experts, lobbyists, and strategic advisors all coordinated their efforts under Rockefeller's leadership, transforming what could have been fatal attacks into manageable obstacles. The power of persistence, weathering storms to reach unprecedented heights. Napoleon Hill declared that persistence is to character what carbon is to steel, the element that transforms ordinary determination into invincible resolve. Throughout his extraordinary journey from poverty to unimaginable wealth, John D. Rockefeller embodied this principle with such unwavering consistency that persistence became synonymous with his very identity. Where others saw insurmountable obstacles, Rockefeller perceived temporary inconveniences. Where competitors surrendered to adversity, he discovered opportunities disguised as challenges. The first great test of Rockefeller's persistence came during the oil industry's chaotic early years, when wildly fluctuating prices and boom-bust cycles destroyed fortunes as quickly as they were made. While speculators and gamblers rode the waves of fortune and disaster, Rockefeller maintained his methodical approach to building sustainable competitive advantages. When oil prices plummeted from $10 per barrel to 10 cents almost overnight, eliminating dozens of refineries, Rockefeller didn't retreat or despair. Instead, he systematically acquired the facilities of bankrupt competitors, understanding that persistence through adversity often provides the greatest opportunities for advancement. Hill taught that persistence must be backed by a burning desire and definite plans, and Rockefeller's response to the Great Chicago Fire of 1871 perfectly illustrated this principle. When the catastrophic blaze destroyed much of America's industrial heartland, creating massive disruption in transportation and commerce, many business leaders adopted defensive strategies focused on minimizing losses. Rockefeller saw the crisis differently, as a chance to accelerate Standard Oil's expansion while competitors were paralyzed by uncertainty. His persistence in pursuing acquisitions during this chaotic period laid the foundation for Standard Oil's eventual dominance of the American oil industry. Perhaps no single episode better demonstrates Rockefeller's extraordinary persistence than his response to the coordinated attack launched by independent oil producers in the 1870s. Facing a coalition of competitors determined to break Standard Oil's growing monopoly, most business leaders would have sought accommodation or compromise, but Rockefeller understood that half measures often prove more dangerous than bold action. He launched what became known as the Cleveland Massacre, systematically acquiring or destroying every independent refinery in Ohio through a combination of economic pressure, strategic negotiations, and relentless competitive tactics. The psychological pressure during this period was enormous. Rockefeller faced daily attacks in the press, where he was portrayed as a robber baron destroying honest competition and exploiting American consumers. Death threats arrived regularly in his mail, and angry crowds sometimes gathered outside his Cleveland home. Lesser men might have wilted under such sustained assault, but Rockefeller's persistence was reinforced by his unshakable faith in the righteousness of his cause. He believed that industrial consolidation would benefit consumers through lower prices and more efficient operations, and this conviction sustained him through the darkest periods of public hostility. Hill wrote that persistence often requires the ability to transmute failure into opportunity, and Rockefeller demonstrated this principle during the economic panic of 1873. The financial crisis that devastated American business became Standard Oil's greatest period of expansion, as Rockefeller used the company's cash reserves to acquire distressed assets at bargain prices. While competitors struggled to survive, Standard Oil emerged from the Depression stronger than ever, controlling an even larger share of the oil industry. This pattern would repeat throughout Rockefeller's career, each crisis becoming a stepping stone to greater dominance. The ultimate test of Rockefeller's persistence came with the rise of antitrust sentiment and government intervention in the early 20th century. The Sherman Antitrust Act, and subsequent legal challenges represented existential threats to Standard Oil's continued existence. For over a decade, Rockefeller and his associates fought a complex legal battle against government prosecutors determined to break up their empire. Lesser businessmen might have negotiated early settlements or accepted partial defeats, but Rockefeller's persistence demanded nothing less than complete vindication of his business methods. Even when the Supreme Court finally ordered Standard Oil's dissolution in 1911, Rockefeller's response demonstrated the transformative power of persistent thinking. Rather than viewing the breakup as defeat, he recognized that the individual companies created from Standard Oil's divisions might ultimately prove more valuable than the original monopoly. His persistence in maintaining significant ownership stakes in these successor companies generated even greater wealth than the original Standard Oil monopoly had provided. Self-discipline and emotional control. The inner fortress of unshakable composure. Napoleon Hill recognized that self-discipline forms the foundation upon which all other success principles must be built, for without mastery over one's emotions and impulses, even the most brilliant strategies crumble under pressure. John D. Rockefeller's legendary composure in the face of extraordinary stress and provocation became one of his most powerful competitive weapons, enabling him to negotiate billion-dollar deals and navigate corporate crises with the calm precision of a master surgeon performing delicate operations. From his earliest days as a bookkeeper in Cleveland, Rockefeller cultivated what Hill called emotional equilibrium, the ability to maintain rational thinking regardless of external circumstances. While his colleagues might celebrate wildly after successful transactions or despair during market downturns, Rockefeller remained steadfastly focused on long-term objectives rather than short-term emotions. This wasn't natural temperament, but disciplined practice, developed through years of conscious effort to separate feelings from decision-making processes. The depth of Rockefeller's self-discipline became legendary in American business circles, where stories circulated about his supernatural ability to remain calm during the most intense negotiations. When railroad executives attempted to pressure Standard Oil into accepting unfavorable shipping rates, Rockefeller would listen patiently to their demands, ask clarifying questions with genuine interest, and then methodically explain why their proposals were unacceptable, all without raising his voice or displaying the slightest indication of annoyance. This controlled approach often unnerved opponents who expected anger or desperation, giving Rockefeller significant psychological advantages in competitive situations. Hill taught that self-discipline must extend beyond business affairs to encompass all aspects of personal conduct, and Rockefeller's lifestyle reflected this comprehensive approach to self-mastery. He avoided alcohol, tobacco, and other substances that might impair his judgment or create dependencies. His diet was carefully regulated to maintain optimal physical and mental performance. His social activities were chosen based on their potential to advance his business objectives rather than provide entertainment or pleasure. Every aspect of his existence was subordinated to his larger mission of building an oil empire. The most remarkable demonstration of Rockefeller's emotional control occurred during the intense public scrutiny and vilification that accompanied Standard Oil's rise to dominance. Newspaper editors portrayed him as a heartless monopolist, crushing honest competition. Political cartoonists depicted him as an octopus strangling American commerce, and public speakers denounced him as an enemy of democratic capitalism. Throughout this sustained campaign of character assassination, Rockefeller maintained his focus on business operations rather than engaging in public relations battles or personal vendettas against his critics. This discipline extended to his management style within Standard Oil, where Rockefeller's emotional control created an atmosphere of rational analysis rather than personality-driven decision-making. During heated board meetings where strong personalities clashed over strategic directions, Rockefeller served as a calming influence who guided discussions toward productive outcomes. He never allowed personal animosity or wounded pride to influence business decisions, understanding that emotional reactions often cloud judgment and lead to suboptimal choices. Rockefeller's self-discipline also manifested in his approach to wealth accumulation and spending. Despite possessing enormous resources, he continued to live relatively modestly for decades, reinvesting profits back into business expansion rather than indulging in luxurious consumption. This wasn't miserliness, but strategic discipline. He understood that every dollar spent on personal gratification was a dollar unavailable for building his empire. His famous habit of recording every expenditure in detailed ledgers continued throughout his life, ensuring that even immense wealth didn't corrupt his disciplined approach to financial management. The ultimate test of emotional control came during the government's antitrust prosecution of Standard Oil, when Rockefeller faced the possibility of criminal charges and personal disgrace. The stress of prolonged legal battles, hostile media coverage, and political persecution would have broken most individuals, but Rockefeller's disciplined response demonstrated the power of emotional mastery under extreme pressure. He cooperated fully with government investigators while maintaining his dignity and composure, never allowing anger or resentment to influence his strategic responses to legal challenges. Legacy and the law of giving, transforming wealth into immortal impact. Napoleon Hill understood that true success extends far beyond personal accumulation to encompass the positive impact one creates in the world, and perhaps no principle in his philosophy was more profoundly embodied than in John D. Rockefeller's transformation from ruthless capitalist to history's greatest philanthropist. The same systematic thinking and organized planning that built Standard Oil would eventually revolutionize charitable giving, creating institutions and initiatives that continue to benefit humanity more than a century after their establishment. The seeds of Rockefeller's philanthropic philosophy were planted during his impoverished childhood, when he witnessed his mother's quiet acts of charity despite their family's financial struggles. Eliza Rockefeller would share meals with hungry neighbors, contribute small amounts to their Baptist church, and teach young John that wealth carries moral obligations to help those less fortunate. These early lessons created a foundation of values that would eventually guide the distribution of the world's greatest private fortune. Hill wrote extensively about the law of increasing returns, the principle that giving multiplies wealth rather than diminishing it. Rockefeller discovered this truth experientially, beginning his philanthropic activities even before achieving great wealth. As a young clerk earning modest wages, he tithed 10% of his income to charitable causes, a practice he continued throughout his life regardless of his financial circumstances. This early commitment to giving created what Hill called a prosperity consciousness that seemed to attract ever greater opportunities for wealth accumulation. The systematic approach that characterized Rockefeller's business operations soon extended to his charitable endeavors, transforming philanthropy from random acts of kindness into strategic interventions designed to address root causes of human suffering. Rather than simply donating money to existing charities, Rockefeller began creating new institutions specifically designed to maximize the impact of his contributions. The Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, established in 1901, pioneered scientific approaches to disease prevention and treatment that saved millions of lives worldwide. Perhaps the most visionary example of Rockefeller's strategic philanthropy was his support for education, particularly in the American South, where decades of poverty and racial discrimination had created massive educational deficits. The General Education Board, founded with Rockefeller funding in 1902, didn't simply build schools but developed comprehensive systems for teacher training, curriculum development, and educational administration. This approach multiplied the impact of each dollar invested, creating sustainable improvements that continued generating benefits long after the initial contributions were made. Hill taught that the highest form of success involves lifting others to greater heights, and Rockefeller's international philanthropy demonstrated this principle on a global scale. When he learned about hookworm disease devastating populations in the southern United States and tropical regions worldwide, he didn't simply donate money for treatment, but funded comprehensive research and prevention programs that eventually eradicated the disease from many areas. The Rockefeller Sanitary Commission's hookworm eradication campaign became a model for public health interventions that continue to influence disease prevention strategies today. The psychological transformation that accompanied Rockefeller's philanthropic activities revealed another dimension of Hill's success principles. As he shifted focus from accumulating wealth to distributing it effectively, Rockefeller discovered new sources of satisfaction and meaning that enriched his life in ways that money alone never could. The same analytical skills and strategic thinking that built Standard Oil now served humanity's broader interests, creating a sense of purpose that transcended personal achievement. Rockefeller's approach to philanthropy also demonstrated Hill's principle of organized planning applied to charitable giving. Rather than responding emotionally to requests for help, he established systematic processes for evaluating potential recipients, measuring outcomes, and ensuring accountability. The Rockefeller Foundation, created in 1913, pioneered modern philanthropic practices that emphasized scientific rigor, measurable results, and sustainable impact, rather than well-intentioned but ineffective charity. The Eternal Principles, your blueprint for extraordinary achievement, as we reach the culmination of this remarkable journey through the life and principles of John D. Rockefeller, we find ourselves standing before a mirror that reflects not just the story of one man's extraordinary rise from poverty to unprecedented wealth, but a timeless blueprint for human achievement that transcends any single era or industry. The principles that Napoleon Hill decoded from studying America's most successful individuals, and which Rockefeller embodied with such devastating effectiveness, remain as powerful today as they were over a century ago, waiting to transform the lives of those bold enough to apply them with unwavering commitment. The burning desire that drove a 16-year-old boy to record every penny in his leather notebook still burns within countless individuals today who refuse to accept their current circumstances as permanent limitations. Like Rockefeller, they understand that wealth creation begins not with external resources, but with an internal transformation, the cultivation of an obsessive, all-consuming passion for financial freedom that refuses to accept defeat or compromise. This desire becomes the engine that powers every other principle, the foundational energy that sustains effort through inevitable obstacles and setbacks. The faith and vision that enabled Rockefeller to see oil refineries and distribution networks before they existed physically continues to separate extraordinary achievers from those who remain trapped by apparent limitations. In our modern world of technological innovation and global connectivity, this principle manifests as the ability to envision and create solutions to problems that others haven't even recognized yet. The entrepreneurs building tomorrow's great fortunes possess the same unshakable confidence in their destined success that characterized Rockefeller's approach to the oil industry. Organized planning remains as crucial today as it was when Rockefeller methodically constructed his oil empire, though the tools and methods have evolved dramatically. Modern wealth builders leverage sophisticated software, global communications networks, and advanced analytical techniques. But the underlying principle remains unchanged. Success demands systematic translation of vision into detailed, actionable strategies executed with relentless consistency. The complexity of today's business environment makes organized planning even more essential, as random efforts and hopeful improvisation prove inadequate against sophisticated competition. The mastermind principle has perhaps become more powerful in our interconnected world, where collaboration across geographical and cultural boundaries can create competitive advantages unavailable to previous generations. Like Rockefeller's carefully constructed alliances with railroad executives and international partners, today's most successful individuals build networks of mutually beneficial relationships that multiply their individual capabilities exponentially. Social media, professional networking platforms, and global communication systems provide unprecedented opportunities for creating mastermind alliances with like-minded individuals worldwide. Persistence continues to separate ultimate winners from those who surrender to temporary setbacks, though the pace of change in modern business requires even greater adaptability and resilience. The same quality that enabled Rockefeller to weather economic panics, legal challenges, and public vilification now empowers entrepreneurs to survive market crashes, technological disruptions, and regulatory changes that would defeat less determined competitors. In an era where entire industries can be transformed overnight, persistence must be coupled with continuous learning and strategic flexibility. Self-discipline and emotional control have become even more crucial in our age of instant gratification and constant distraction. The same inner fortress of composure that enabled Rockefeller to negotiate billion-dollar deals while maintaining rational objectivity now helps modern wealth builders navigate volatile financial markets, manage complex organizations, and make critical decisions despite information overload and emotional pressure. The ability to separate feelings from facts remains one of the most valuable skills any individual can develop. The law of giving that transformed Rockefeller from a feared monopolist into a beloved philanthropist offers perhaps the most profound lesson for modern wealth builders. True success extends beyond personal accumulation to encompass positive impact on others, and the most fulfilled and ultimately successful individuals understand that their greatest achievements involve lifting others to higher levels of prosperity and happiness. In our interconnected global economy, this principle creates sustainable competitive advantages while generating deep personal satisfaction that money alone cannot provide. And you? Are you applying these principles in your own life? The path to wealth begins in your mind, with the recognition that the same principles that transformed a poor boy from Cleveland into history's richest man remain available to anyone with sufficient desire, faith, and persistence to apply them consistently. The tools and opportunities available today surpass anything Rockefeller could have imagined, but the fundamental principles of wealth creation remain unchanged. Your current circumstances, like his, are temporary conditions that can be transformed through systematic application of timeless success principles. The secret that made Rockefeller a legend wasn't some mysterious formula unavailable to others, but rather the disciplined application of principles that anyone can learn and implement. His story proves that extraordinary achievement isn't reserved for those born into privilege or blessed with unique talents, but available to anyone willing to pay the price of sustained effort guided by proven principles. The question isn't whether these principles work. Rockefeller's life provides overwhelming evidence of their effectiveness. The only question is whether you possess sufficient desire to apply them with the same relentless consistency that transformed a penny-counting teenager into the architect of America's first great business empire. If this story inspired you, subscribe now, leave your like and share this video. Activate the bell so you don't miss any revelation. The secret that made Rockefeller a billionaire can transform your life too, but only if you take action on the principles you've discovered today. Your journey to extraordinary wealth and success begins with your decision to stop making excuses and start applying these timeless principles with the same systematic dedication that created the greatest fortune in human history.